In total, there are about 1,670 scouts that are deployed in all the counties that are affected by locust. These scouts, they may be distributed differently depending on the threat of locust in every county. And therefore, their role really is to ensure that anytime locust cross in, that there is an alarm being raised, and then the locust can be tracked until they are able to roost or perch somewhere, then they can be attacked. So in terms of surveillance, in terms of monitoring, we're in a much, much better place than we are today. With regard to whether we can say that we'll never have locusts again in this country, that may not be necessarily realistic. Why? Because they're not necessarily coming from our country. They're moving in from other countries. From elsewhere. So perhaps what you can say that will we be able to have mechanism that would be able to limit or reduce the impact on the ground when they perch? Yes, that I can assure you.
Talk of mechanisms, Kanu, is it possible for us to have a joint task force with our neighbors to ensure that we understand what they need to do, because we know very clearly where they come from? Is that possible? I ask this because I know that we've had some minor disagreements with one of our neighbors. But is it possible? That's really what I'm asking.
It's possible because right now, even what IGAD is doing, remember, this is a situation that is cross-border, that you cannot be able on your own to handle it without, similar activity in a neighboring country. And if that were not to happen, then whatever you're doing in your country may be successful, but may not be efficient, right? So yes, IGAD, being the structure at that level, has brought in all the stakeholders from every country within the region to be able to come up with a mechanism that now can be used to deal with the locust. And that is why we're even saying right now that FAO Somalia, FAO Ethiopia has put in place mechanisms that would help in terms of combating the locust. Indeed, in Somalia, there could be issues that we all understand, and therefore the mechanisms and even the intervention in that country may not as effective as our country here and the other country up north. But certainly FAO and IGAD is working together to ensure that there is a regional mechanism to deal with the locust.
Philip, just from what we've been able to see before, and now we're in some wet weather around the country, and we've seen previously with these swarms that you have a little bit of new vegetation, and that encourages these swarms to get excited again about eating up that little vegetation. With the rain, farmers are also encouraged to plant. So what are we looking at here in this current situation? Planting vis-a-vis waiting while these swarms are being taken care of. How are these being able to go forward?
From what I got from the ground, the government is encouraging the population or encouraging the country to go on with their lives. You should not stop because the locusts are here. Because they also don't stay in one particular place at any given time. They keep moving. So they might come to your place or they may not come to your place. So if you decide not to plant and then eventually they don't come to your region, it will be your loss.
Right.
So they're encouraging us or the population out there to continue their lives as they also try and handle the situation in the best way they know.
In some of these areas where there was the invasion of the first phase, and of course, because of very many other factors, then there were farmers who got seriously affected. What has the government done to help them recover?
Yes, the government working together with other development partners, FAO, World Bank, DLCO, have come up with kind of support to the farmers that have been affected. One of the support that's given to these farmers is to provide them with training in how they can be able to engage in modern ways of farming. But secondly, they're also being provided with subsidized seeds, to be able to plant. So they have got subsidized seeds. They are also being given fertilizers to be able to support them when they are planting. So the government certainly is on top of that, working together with FAO as well as World Bank and also DLCO.
Are those areas also affected again by the second wave?
Some of the areas are affected, like, we went to Isiolo, like Kipi, as well as Meru region. And yes, they were affected. Indeed, they would be affected. The reason being that, like you're saying, this is desert locust, meaning that they should be found in areas that are a bit of arsal regions, a bit dry, So again, if there be a third wave, the same areas will still be affected.
They're likely to be
They're likely to be affected. Yes.
As you spoke to the people on the ground, Philip, and especially those parts of Isiolo, which had been affected the first time, and now there's a second wave. What are the people feeling? What's the feeling of the people on the ground? Are they feeling that they are now happy with what the government is doing? Are they still hung up with maybe what did not happen the first time?
We visited a few farms, a few families that live in Isiolo, and they were happy with how the situation was being handled currently. But the first time, they are saying they were really devastated. They felt they were on their own the first time. But this time around, they are feeling the government has come out to help them. They have not seen as much locusts that they had seen the first time. And they feel also they are being involved in the fight, in this fight of fighting the locust.
Mm. And Colonel Oguna has told us about some of those NGOs that are working at, creating animal feeds out of this. I mean, that's quite innovative. Did you have experience with any of those organizations, Philip?
No, I didn't get an opportunity to meet them. I'm still trying to wrap my head on how even they will start collecting those locusts.
How are they doing it, Colonel?
They're doing it this way. That at night they have light. So when this, pests see light, then they come to us, and then they're trapped, and then they fall in a drum.
All right.
Yes. So the only challenge, like I did mention, that even them, they were able to tell us that, you cannot tell locust that has been sprayed and one that has not been sprayed.
Yeah.
And that's why even as they prepare, they process them, they're not necessarily designed for human consumption, as it is. Yeah.
So it's mainly for animal consumption.
For animal feeds, yes.
But I would assume that maybe there's a number of days when the residue then falls off. So you can say if you've sprayed, then the residue is on for
yes. But you see,
2, 3.
Yeah, indeed, and exactly what Keitany was saying, that the pesticide that is used is supposed to oxidize within a period of 72 hours. That is 3 days. Right? So within 3 days, then they're not supposed to be, harmful in whatever way. But again, you cannot tell when this locust was sprayed.
Yeah.
It might have been sprayed yesterday. So it has not necessarily gone through the 72-hour period, right? So you still have to take some precaution.
Right.
Yes.
Something that keeps moving my head with regards to this matter of locusts. Do we know, are there known patterns for these locust invasions?
Yes, indeed. From FAO and from the expert, yes, there are known patterns and there are known corridors where they pass through, depending on the wind direction. So when there is wind blowing from, say, Middle East to Yemen into Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, then they follow that pattern of the wind. So there are areas that they will be known to actually to enter through the country. They will probably not come from the places like Lodwar, but they'll eventually get to Turkana through that pattern through which the wind flows. So that is something that we are told, we have been advised by the FAO, that weather is an important factor when it comes to dealing with locusts.
Is there any benefit we derive from these invasions? I mean, the negatives, we always talk about just how they eat everything they come across. But those who study locusts, are there any benefits that...
I would imagine so, because any new phenomenon that comes in, remember, the last time that there was major locust invasion was 70 years ago. And therefore, people who study locusts might have gone without any live example, 70 years later. So now that we are seeing locusts after 70 years, certainly those who are in that field are actually, doing a lot of studies to find out the patterns, how they migrate, how they multiply, the kind of routes they take. So yes, there's a lot that can be learned from that academically, which can then be, or scientifically, that can then be used in terms of, our intervention. Yes.
Do you think it'll get to a point whereby, look, I'm all for the partnerships that we see happening between non-governmental organizations and government, intergovernmental and things like that. I think it's definitely a way to go, especially for development. Do you think it can get to the point whereby Kenya, a country like Kenya, takes the lead in some of these things, to see that there are areas within the country whereby things like this are prone to happen? by virtue of the fact that geography is a certain way. Do you think that Kenya could take the lead at some point and say, well, you know what, this is what we see. Anything that would come in would be support.
You're asking at the regional level or at
the country level?
At the country level, certainly yes. Even when you have DLCO, we have got FAO, we have got all these other, agencies. They're still working under the direction of the government. The government
the government of Kenya is taking the lead.
Taking the lead.
Okay.
Yes. So all these other NGOs are just coming in to provide support.
Okay.
But the lead agency is the government. Yes. At the regional level, certainly it may not necessarily be an individual government because now there's a regional mechanism. And there are two mechanisms here talking about IGAD at the that level, but also the EAC. EAC in the sense that if it is affecting member states of the EAC, then again it is up to the EAC to come up with various strategies on how these 6 countries of the region can be able to deal with the locust. Now beyond EAC, certainly IGAD comes in to be able to find a mechanism that can be deployed to be able to deal with the locust at the regional level. Yes, and beyond IGAD, certainly there are also other agencies. Because if you're talking about DLCO is basically for East Africa, but there are other DLCO for other regions of Africa as well. Yes.
So with all these organizations and agencies in place, what went wrong the first time?
There's nothing really that went wrong. Certainly this, like we did mention that, for 70 years, there was no infrastructure on the ground. Again, this is not something that you really expect to happen every now and then.
Yeah.
So when they were sited for the first time, then now mobilization had to start in terms of putting structures on the ground, in terms of coming up with various bases on the ground, in terms of mobilizing logistics to be positioned to be able to deal with the locust.
Yeah.
That took a bit of time. Right now we're talking about 6 bases that have been established in the country. Those bases were established in phase 1.
Yeah.
But now after the locust in phase 1 were sort of contained and controlled, we did not necessarily deactivate these bases.
Yeah.
So when phase 2 did come in, then now we only sort of strengthened and reactivated the bases. Right? So infrastructure was on the ground in phase 2. Now, we cannot say the same for phase 1. Yes. So as we are preparing, certainly the locusts were still, they kept on coming, But right now, this time around, they're coming and they're being contained and being surveilled and then targeted for neutralization.
So you're basically saying that it was a steep curve. I mean, you're talking about people who have studied locusts but have not dealt with a locust invasion of this magnitude, and they are suddenly thrown into the deep end. Locusts are coming. We are seeing
they're here on the ground. You don't have pesticides, you don't have aircraft, you don't have any ground surveillance team trained. Right. So you have to train them. And training teams takes a bit of time to train a team to be able, because these people are not necessarily people who have studied locusts, but you're training them so that they can be able to help you in the containment, right? And of course, some of these locusts, they go and roost in areas that are completely, hostile in terms of terrain.
Yeah.
So when you have locusts in such kind of environment that aircraft cannot go in there, normal, scout cannot go in there, then you have to look for another, support. And this is when our KDF comes in to go and help out in spraying areas where many scouts may not want to venture in because of either insecurity based on the nature of terrain.
Yeah.
Yes.
So from those lessons that have been taken, organizations such as FAO and DLCU must be putting, keeping their records for the sake of the other generation 70 years from
Certainly,
now.
Yes. Not just at FAO, but even at the ministry, at government level.
At government level.
Yeah, their records being kept.
So what kind of lessons are they, from your interaction with these experts, what kind of lessons are they picking in terms of in future? If you see, maybe you have started seeing swarms developing in that neighboring country in Yemen, it's going to take approximately this long for them to arrive here. So this is what
locusts move at a pace of 130 or to 50 kilometers a day. So therefore, if they are seen in perhaps somewhere in Somalia or somewhere in Ethiopia, you can be able to estimate within what period of time they'll be able to cross into this country. And by that time now, based on the experience from the previous phases or previous invasions, then you can begin to very quickly mobilize, because now the infrastructure is on the ground. Perhaps what we may not, depending on when the next wave will come. If the next wave comes again 70 years from now, then certainly you can be rest assured that we may not have the pesticide to just keep them for 70 years. So when they come, and we perhaps notice them maybe coming from Yemen, coming from other parts of Middle East, then we begin to mobilize quickly, if ever they'll cross into the country. So that when they cross, then we are ready for them. That did not happen during phase 1. Phase 2, yes, it did happen.
When we talk about pesticides that we use, from my reading, I came across something that the FAO has recommended, a fungus, that the name is actually lengthy. Let me try and read it. Metahisium anisophlea. The fungus is supposed to, as opposed to this spraying, it grows inside the locust and then kills it eventually. Have we applied some of these new fungal ideas that maybe FAO has come up with?
I will not talk about FAO and what they have, but what I know that we are using as a government is a pesticide that is able to break very quickly. It's actually a spray. And even if you are looking at an aircraft spraying, very close to the aircraft, you may not even be able to see the fumes coming out, because it is sprayed in a manner that as soon as it gets out of the cylinder, it begins to break down, right? So, that's why we're calling it that it atomizes very, very quickly, to the extent that, by the time it's getting onto the surfaces of this locust, they may not kill them immediately. And that is by design, because you're also doing that so that the amount of, poison may not be harmful even to the local fauna and to the environment, so that they will probably die several hours, maybe hours later. So it is possible, therefore, that some people may see spraying taking place, but they don't see locusts dying immediately. So they're concerned that they may be saying that nothing is happening. But that is done by design. So that is the one that we're using, so that we are able also to conserve the environment, also protect the health of our people. Yeah.
Right. Philip, do you see that there are people in the area who would want to use locusts for food?
I didn't come across any person who was talking about using it as food. But in our conversation with both some experts in the field, they were saying they can be consumed as food, but at the current state, because of the intervention the government is doing, they were not advising that you consume the locust as food, because as Colonel Oguna has rightly put it, you don't know which locust has been sprayed or which one has not been. So you may end up consuming a contaminated locust, thinking you've got some nice protein on your plate.
But also, in addition to that, if you allow me,
Yes.
the aspect of food has got also cultural,
Right.
aspects to it. So there are certain cultures in this country that may probably find locust a delicacy.
Which is where I was going with that, because that's an option for some people.
Yeah, but unfortunately,
So
the
people to
culture,
pick
that
up a new
culture,
culture.
that
Well,
culture.
no, not necessarily. But then what happens to those who may have who look at it and then we're discouraging them from doing so, or even looking at it as
But
a source?
it's a health issue.
Health hazard is a major one.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a major one.
Yeah.
But indeed, again, even areas where people have got the culture of feeding on these locusts, unfortunately, they're not in those areas.
Okay.
These are areas perhaps of Western Kenya, but now these locusts, have invaded northeastern and eastern provinces, whose culture may not necessarily,
For them, this is
No,
not
their
food.
dietary culture doesn't include locusts.
into locust.
Or
You understand?
grasshoppers or
So
such.
even though
Yes, or
a
snakes
lot
like
has been
fish.
said about, the locust being very rich in proteins, but as a government, we're still concerned about the health issue.
Yeah.
Right.
And therefore, I know that perhaps some cultures can rub onto others. So when they hear that people of one region can eat them, they may also want to try them out in another region. But nonetheless, the government is very concerned about, the health implications of this. Once you've sprayed a locust, indeed, like we did say, that within 3 days, all the pesticide would have atomized,
Yes.
and therefore it's no longer harmful. But then may not tell when it was sprayed, or where it was sprayed from.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're better, off without necessarily, trapping them for a meal.
Why are these locusts called desert locusts?
Because they thrive best in a desert environment. Yes.
Essentially, you're saying they're attracted to areas that are dry or semi-arid.
Yes.
But then they have to eat, and I'm certain that part of their of the dietary consideration is not sand. Okay.
It's not sand, but even in a desert environment, they're actually green foliage.
Yeah, but not that plenty.
Not that much, but you see, that's why you can't find them in Eldoret in large quantity, because of even Nyeri, even parts of Mount Kenya, because it is pretty cold there.
Climatic
Because
conditions.
Yes. So, the way, based on what we saw in Isiolo, is that when the weather is damp, they don't fly. They're waiting for the weather to get a bit dry so that the wings can be able to become turgid.
Because their wings
wind as well.
also get wet.
Yes,
Yes.
you understand. So in areas where perhaps the weather, and the temperatures may be a bit low, they may not survive well in such areas. That's why areas like this eastern province.
So they simply is it like, for instance, given that their life cycle isn't really that great?
3 months.
Yes. So they more or less find a place where they can eat, reproduce, and then wait to die.
Wait to die. Yes.
Okay. And we're shortening that cycle. Okay.
Imagine. Because of the impact that those 3 months have on people's lives.
Oh, it's devastating.
We were asking Philip to explain to us and just paint for us a picture of the size of a swarm. And he told us, for example, this one he witnessed in Kangeta, which he says, if you just look at the entire of Nairobi CBD, that is one swarm. Paint for us a picture.
Yes, but the swarms that we are seeing now may not be that expansive compared to what we saw during phase one.
Okay.
Philip was flabbergasted by what he saw.
Maybe it was flabbergasted
And
because he didn't
Shanghai.
see
He didn't see
swamp
phase
during
one.
phase one.
In fact, he's still recovering even as we speak.
Yeah, he was shocked. Of course, I was with him. He was shocked.
Shangaya Musa.
But you see, what we saw in phase one, if swarms are passing over this building, it will be a total shadow to darkness here.
What?
Yes, that is what we're dealing with during phase one. Phase two, locusts sort of, when they cross, what we have also seen is that they're also breaking into smaller swarms. You may find one big swarm crossing into the country from a neighboring country, and then it splits into smaller swarms. And that's why even when talking about 306 that have been sighted, there may not be 306 in that strict sense of the word, but they are just swarms that have been sighted here and there. Some of them could be sighted in one count in three different counties. It's the same swarm that is moving across the same county.
As a military man, would you say that locusts have learned to have military formations?
I mean, the military formations actually came out from swarms somehow. From how this thing behave.
So humans learned from locusts.
Yes, indeed, it's true. But okay, I mean, the bigger point here would be that what we are seeing now is very different from what we saw then. Right now, we're dealing with swarms that may not be 40 by 60 kilometers. Probably we're talking about 40 by 60 kilometers swarm that when they cross into a city like Nairobi, it will be total darkness. Yes, and even aircraft would not fly.
Yeah. That was quite huge.
But what we're dealing with right now, well, he's surprised because he didn't see.
He didn't see the first one.
Yes.
Colonel Oguna, as we conclude this conversation this morning, what is it that you'd like to tell, people who are in those counties that are likely to be visited by these desert locusts?
Indeed, you see, like I did mention at the very beginning, that if you can't see it, then you can't engage it. And therefore, there are two things. They must be on the lookout for these swarms. And as soon as they see them, they report to the nearest, chief or the nearest DCC for action to be taken. Now, when they are advised of what action they need to take before, during, and even after spraying, let them abide by that, because they're concerned about the well-being of our people, the health of our people. Indeed, like it was mentioned that locusts do chew mira. They chew mogoka, the leaves, but not the mira stick itself. But certainly people are concerned about, livelihoods. Yes. Now, our situation even during phase 1 and phase 2, has been much, much better, in the sense that we received these locusts when we're just about to go into harvesting season. Phase 1 and phase 2 as well, right? And therefore, the level of destruction might not have been that bad. If we were, invaded when, our crops were this high, then it would have been devastating. So you're a bit lucky. And therefore, to our people, they should not be so scared about planting. We are in control as a government. We have mechanisms put in place to be able to effectively deal with any swarms that have been cited, for as long as the information is relayed quickly.
Thank you very much. We always believe you when you tell us the government is in control.
It is in control.
But today, because there's also Philip, who is also saying the same thing, we believe you even more.
No, indeed, the government this time around, and of course we have to concede that phase 1 was a bit not as well organized, which is understandable, right? Like we say in the military, no plan survives contact.
Yeah.
Philip?
Maybe I can ask Colonel one question.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So we want to conclude the conversation, Philip, because we've run out of time. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Philip Keitany of Farmers TV. Join him on KTN Farmers TV 4 to 5 p.m. on AgriTalk, and Colonel Cyrus Oguna, government spokesperson. Asante sana.
Nashukuru sana.
We look forward to hosting you again.
Every day. I'm always ready.
Asante sana.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.